What are some of the best and worst fantasy matchups for week 2? We're talking about that in today's video. As always, guys, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Help us get to 1,400 subscribers. And of course, join our Discord. It's free. Link is in the description. You can join us live, ask whatever questions you want. And we're bringing this back. We did this last year. We had a lot of success. Football and fantasy football is so much about matchups. Who has good, who has bad matchups, and that usually translates to bad and good performances in fantasy football. And we're starting off with the good ones, and we're starting off with quarterback position. I got two quarterbacks for you that have good matchups. Now, if you remember from last year, guys, we try to avoid stating the obvious. For example, Joe Burrow has one of the best matchups this week against Jacksonville, but everyone's starting Joe Burrow. These are more guys that maybe you're debating on, should I start this player or this player, to kind of use this as a tiebreaker, to determine who you should be starting and who you should be sitting. JJ McCarthy, I think, has a really good matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. JJ McCarthy last week was awesome. He put up 23.2 fantasy points, which was good for a top 12 quarterback in week 1. We saw him kind of gain the confidence that he needed. He was running the ball, which he can do. He only ran it twice, but he can run it a little bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if he averaged 20 to 30 rushing yards a game. And if that's part of his game, which is going to be great for fantasy football. But his matchup is awesome against the Atlanta Falcons. I think across the board, his matchups in the tight end position, his offensive line, I think, is one of the better offensive lines at pass blocking. And I don't really like Atlanta's pass rush. I think the matchups for the wide receivers are good. Hopefully they're all healthy. And then I think his matchups for his running backs, which is probably the worst, of that group of tight ends, pass blocking and wide receivers, but still pretty damn good. So I expect JJ McCarthy to have another good week. Hopefully he continues to run the ball. Again, give you 20 to 30 yards. And I wouldn't be surprised if he looks good again, because the matchup, I think, against Atlanta is pretty good. We just saw Baker throw for 3 touchdowns against the Falcons last week. Only threw for 167 yards, but still threw for 3 touchdowns, rushed for 40 yards. So I'm expecting another good game from JJ McCarthy. Jared Goff. You may be doubting Goff a little bit. That offense for the Lions did not look good, but I think Jared Goff has a really, really good matchup here against the Bears. Again, across the board, I think the pass protection for the Lions versus the pass rush of the Bears should be a favorable matchup for the Lions. Now, the Lions probably aren't as dominant in the offensive line as they were last year, which could be a concern, especially for a quarterback like Goff. But I do think they kind of get right this game. They got a little bit embarrassed at Green Bay a bit. Just didn't look good. Wasn't competitive. But now we just saw Green Bay play last night, and they kind of shut down the Commanders' offense decently well. So maybe the Packers' defense is just good. I don't think the Bears' defense is that good as the Packers. And so I expect a bounce back game for Goff. I wouldn't mind starting him this week. Some bad matchups at the quarterback position, and these are guys that I'm trying to pick guys that you're likely thinking about starting, or there's a good chance you do start. And again, if you have multiple options, then maybe you should pivot. If you don't, then maybe you just kind of ride the storm. This is not going to hit 100%, but there's a chance that that it does. So Patrick Mahomes, don't love the matchup against the Chiefs. I think this is against the Eagles. I think this is pretty obvious. I mean, Eagles defense is just legit. They're good against tight ends. They're good at pass rushing. They're good against wide receivers. They're good against running backs in the passing game. They're good across the board. The matchups for the Chiefs is just like in the red, essentially. It's just bad across the board. Again, we're looking at tight end matchups, wide receiver matchups, running back receiving matchups, and offensive line pass blocking versus the pass rush. Plus, he could be without Xavier Worthy. Obviously, he's without Rashee Rice. He might not have a lot of weapons here. I mean, he's going to be thrown to an older Travis Kelce, a Marquise Brown, a Juju Smith-Schuster. So I kind of want to avoid Patrick Mahomes if I can. If you picked up one of these quarterbacks on the waiver wire, potentially like a JJ McCarthy, then I think I would be going to pick him. Also, Justin Fields. Tough to bench Justin Fields after putting up almost 30 points in a 4-point per passing touchdown. He was the QB2 that week. But again, the Bills matchup is not great. The one favor for Justin Fields, and where I do think you could see them take advantage of it is the running back receiving. And you have one of the better receiving running backs, in my opinion, in Breece Hall. Get the ball in his hands and he can do a lot of damage with it. So I'll be interested to see if they try and scheme this up a little bit. And Breece Hall has a big game in the receiving game, but the offensive line stuff is not great. Wide receiver matchups is not great. Tight end matchups is not great. That being said, Justin Fields, his cheat code is he runs the ball, right? And all he has to do is have a big game rushing the ball. And big game, I mean double-digit points rushing the ball, whether that's 50, 60 yards and a touchdown or closer to 100 yards. We saw Lamar Jackson run for 70 yards and a touchdown against the Bills last week. So maybe they kind of take advantage of the matchups that they can win at. So I'd probably still be starting Fields. But I do think he doesn't have a great matchup here, and I'd be a little bit wary of it if I had a really good option to pivot to. Into the running backs, I got two good matchups here. James Conner. Again, we're not trying to give you the obvious ones. Derrick Henry has a great matchup. Jahmyr Gibbs has a great matchup. But you're starting these guys. There's no question about you starting these guys, right? So James Conner, maybe there's some questions here. Now, James Conner was solid last week. He was a solid RB2, so maybe there is no debate here. But he's going against the Panthers, which I really, really like for him. Panthers are dead last in missed tackles, dead last in yards after contact allowed, they're in the top 5 worst for yards after contact allowed. I don't think their defensive front is very good. So I just think this is a James Conner type of game. We could see James Conner have a big game. He had good usage last week. I think he had 15, 16 touches with 4 catches. He played 60+% of the snaps, which is kind of where he was last year. So, 4 catches, 12 carries. He just didn't do anything with the receptions. If he gives you, his career average in receiving is what is his career average? About 7.8 yards per reception. So if he was closer to his career average there, giving you 25 to 30 receiving yards, his stat line would look a lot better. Right? If you're giving him 20 more yards, he gives you 65, 70 total yards with a touchdown and 4 catches. You'll take that each and every week, right? So the usage was great for Conner. I think the matchup is great. I expect James Conner to be close to an RB1 this week, if not an RB1. Jordan Mason. This is a guy that, this is why we look at these matchups and stuff like that, because there's a lot of people thinking maybe they need to, they're a little desperate at running back. They're looking at the box score and they say, okay, Jordan Mason got good usage, right? He had 16 touches last week, which is great. The problem is he only gave you, 70 total yards and 1 catch. Like, he kind of needs a touchdown. I don't expect him to ever really catch a bunch of passes. Maybe he has a game, could he get to double digit or not double digit? Could he get to 2-3 catches in a game? Sure. But I think it's going to be closer to like 1.5 catches per game. And, he's going to kind of probably need the touchdown, or he's going to have a game where he averages 6 or 7 yards per carry. But that being said, I do really like his matchup against Atlanta. I think they have a matchup, a big advantage in the defensive front. Yards after contact allowed. The Vikings are up there. And so I think Jordan Mason could potentially have this type of game where, he's going to give you 15 carries, but if he averages, let's just say 5.5 yards per carry or 6 yards per carry, and if he falls into the end zone, then you're going to be pretty happy. I mean, if he averages 5.5 yards per carry, he's going to give you 80+ yards on the ground, maybe a catch here, and then he needs that touchdown to really give him that RB2 type of production. So I think this week it could happen. He could be a little bit of a trap back, so be careful about that. Into some bad matchups here. TreVeyon Henderson versus the Dolphins. And RB25 last week, 11.1 PPR points per game. I think we were expecting a little more from TreVeyon Henderson. Ramondre Stevenson kind of dominated in all aspects of the game. TreVeyon Henderson did catch 6 passes, but he didn't really play on third down, which is kind of crazy. But he did give you, 50 total yards with 6 catches. So he salvaged his game with those 6 catches in PPR. But we're expecting a little bit more here. I don't love the matchup rushing wise for TreVeyon Henderson. I do think he can give you, a repeat of 4 or 5 catches. And also he only got you 24 yards 24 yards through the air last week. I expect TreVeyon Henderson to be closer to 7 or 8 yards per reception, at least, if not higher, because I think he's a talented running back, and running back receptions, yards per reception. If you're like really, really good, you're the CMCs, Austin Ecklers of the world, you're always north of like 8.5 yards per reception. So, if we get closer to that type of number and we kind of double his receiving production to closer to 40 or 50, then that game would be looking a lot better for TreVeyon Henderson. But in terms of rushing the ball, I don't really love it. I think they don't really have a matchup advantage. I don't necessarily think Miami's defensive front is great, but they're good at tackling as of now from what we've seen. They kind of bottled up. You look at Jonathan Taylor last week, like you would have expected him to have a big game considering the Colts had a huge game, but 3.9 yards per attempt. He had 18 carries, did get his 3 catches. Jonathan Taylor was fine for fantasy. He gave you 100 total yards with 3 catches, but they kind of bottled him up. 18 carries, and especially in a game where they were kind of dominating, you would have expected Jonathan Taylor to maybe have 100, 120 rushing yards. And so maybe that's a little bit of a testament to the Dolphins defense. Javonte Williams, another player, he was the RB5, 20.4 points last week. And fantastic usage for Javonte Williams. Miles Sanders fumbled as well. So, do we see a little bit less of a usage for Miles Sanders? Also, he's, I believe, I thought he was on the injury report here, Miles Sanders, but they're talking about Jaden Blue and that Jaden Blue's not necessarily ready. And so this is kind of Javonte's backfield. He played 77% of the snaps. I don't really see that going away. Now, he only averaged 3.5 yards per attempt, but didn't really matter because he got into the end zone twice. I expect him to get this 15 to 17 touches. He'll probably give you a couple of catches. Hopefully he averages 4.5 yards per attempt rather than 3.5. And he gives you, he gives you 60, 70 yards rushing plus a touchdown and a couple of catches. But I don't love this matchup against the Giants. I just think the Giants front is just really damn good. I think it's one of the best in the league. And so I don't really I know they gave up a pretty big yards per carry to Ja'Cory Krusky-Merritt in week 1. I think he averaged, 8.2 yards per attempt. That could have been a little bit fluky. Maybe not. I just think the Giants' defensive front's really good. I don't think there's really a plus matchup for the Cowboys at all. The Giants don't really miss tackles. They don't allow a lot of yards after contact. And their defensive front, I think, is one of the best in the league. So I could see a little bit similar type of production from Javonte in terms of his touches and his yards. He'll give you 15, 17 touches. He'll give you 50, 60 yards total. If he doesn't find the end zone, though, you're going to be pretty damn disappointed. Into the wide receiver matchups here, going a little bit deeper for the wide receivers here just because there's so many good choices. But most of them are guys you're obviously starting, like Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson. We're starting off with Khalil Shakir here. I really like Khalil Shakir. I'm interested to see what the Jets do with Sauce Gardner. If they put Sauce Gardner on Keon Coleman, I think that's the most likely scenario here is that Keon Coleman sees a lot of Sauce Gardner or Brandon Stevens. But if you see Sauce Gardner, that's the guy we want to avoid, right? I don't think Khalil Shakir is going to see much of Sauce Gardner. I think he's going to see him the least out of any of their cornerbacks. I think he's going to see a lot of Michael Carter the second, and I really like that matchup for Khalil Shakir. So, again, just a solid, like fringe wide receiver 2. If he finds the end zone, he's going to be a solid wide receiver 2. If he doesn't, he's probably going to be, again, that wide receiver 2/3, low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. And so I kind of like this matchup for Khalil Shakir, especially if they try and put Sauce Gardner on Keon Coleman and shadow him. Then I think you're going to see the Bills and Josh Allen maybe avoid throwing the ball to Keon Coleman too much this week. Kayshon Boutte. This is, again, we get deep on this, man. I'm not going to tell you to go out there and start freaking Puka Nacua because that doesn't help you at all. Kayshon Boutte. A lot of people ask me on our live streams, is he legit? Is he for real? I don't know, to be completely honest, but what I do know is that we saw a stretch last year of Kayshon Boutte like really getting a lot of work, right? Like and putting up decent numbers. When he started to play 70+% of the snaps, which was basically from like week 6 onward, he started to produce a little bit, right? We saw a decent stretch at the end of the year. Last 5 games for Kayshon Boutte. Boutte. I see it as booty, so hopefully that's right. He put up his 17-game pace over those last 5 weeks of last year: 1,000 yards, 70 catches, six or seven touchdowns. Now, am I saying he's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver? No, but do I think it's out of out of the realm of possibility that he is the kind of the best fantasy and numbers productive wide receiver for the Patriots this year? I actually do think he could be, because his usage was what you need it to be in order to be a consistent option. It's all about offensive snaps. The guys, obviously, you need to be good, but you also need to play enough. If you're not playing enough, if you're only playing 50, 60% of the snaps, that's just not quite enough. Kayshon Boutte played in 81.7% of the snaps. So he was out there a lot. He was out there in 2 wide receiver sets. He was out there in 3 wide receiver sets. Of course, he got a breather here and there, but he was in there, not just on 3 wide receiver sets, not just on 2 wide receiver sets. He was out there in kind of all formation. So I actually think this could be a legit player here. And you think about the Patriots and their wide receiver room, you got an older Stefon Diggs coming off a major injury who didn't look great. Now, the caveat to all of this is are they just slowly bringing Stefon Diggs up, or are they kind of like just keeping Stefon Diggs to this kind of part-time receiver role? But, you have Demario Douglas, who's a slot guy. You have Mac Hollins, who's just a role player. You have Kyle Williams, who's a third-round rookie. Kayshon Boutte, was kind of the next big LSU wide receiver that we thought was coming up, but obviously kind of flamed out in college a little bit his last couple of years. But that being said, I just like his matchups. Jack Jones, Rasul Douglas, even Jason Marshall Jr. Like, those are the 3 cornerbacks you're probably going to see, in particular, Jack Jones and Rasul Douglas. And I like those matchups for him. So I could see a big game from Kayshon Boutte. I mean, you look at or Boutte, you look at guys like Michael Pittman last week against the Dolphins gave you 6 for 80 and stuff like that. So Emeka Egbuka, he's kind of the only wide receiver I could really find that where a lot of people are going to be starting that I think has a bad matchup. And I'm not saying you should be benching him, but I don't love Emeka Egbuka's matchups this week. I don't think it's great. Going up against the Texans. Now, if they put Stingley on Mike Evans and they shadow Mike Evans, then I think it's much better. But that being said, like Lassiter, Jalen Petrie, both those guys are not easy matchups either. Derek Stingley is obviously the one you want to avoid the most. But so if Derek Stingley is just shadowing Mike Evans, which he very well could be, then I think this matchup's better for Emeka Egbuka. But if it's not, then I'm a little bit worried, because not only are Petrie and Lassiter like good cornerbacks, but also Derek Stingley, you'd be seeing a lot of Derek Stingley. So, and that being said, like, we got to be a little bit cautious with Egbuka. I think he's the real deal, but he also only had 4 catches. He was a little bit like Javonte Williams was for the running backs in terms of like the touchdowns really made his week. And if you even just take away one of those touchdowns, you're going to be a little bit disappointed. Not disappointed, but you're not going to be as excited. You wouldn't be disappointed with 16, 17 PPR points. 6 targets, 4 catches. We could see a little bit more in the run game here for the Texans. I'm not saying to bench him, but I wouldn't be surprised if Egbuka had a little bit of a down game. And then for the tight ends, I just have one guy for you with a good matchup. Now, he might not play because he has a knee injury, and maybe this just transfers over to Grant Calcaterra. But I really like Dallas Goedert's matchup here this week. And he's kind of the only guy. Trey McBride also has a really good matchup against Carolina, but obviously we're all starting him. Dallas Goedert, I just really like. I think the linebacker coverage, cornerback coverage, safety coverage, like, I think the matchup is in the Eagles' favor heavily. And I think we could just see a little bit more of, Dallas Goedert and kind of what he did in week one, which he had a bunch of targets. He had 7 for 44, and kind of this is what Dallas Goedert does. He's always slept upon. He's always slept on when it comes to fantasy football, just because maybe we've been hearing about his name forever. He's never really reached like, top 5 tight end type of stuff, but he consistently gives you tight end 1 production. He's the tight end 14 last week. He gives you low end tight end 1 production each and every week, or each and every year. So I could see another one here for Dallas Goedert because of the matchup. So we'll be tracking these all year, seeing how they hit, or maybe they don't hit. I appreciate you all, and I'll catch you guys all in the next video.